So welcome back to TourRadar's annual Adventure Together event. For those of you just joining us today, my name is Caitlin, and this is my colleague Brendan. And we're here and ready for a good day.
Before we kick off, once again, a massive thank you to all of our event sponsors, the Globus family of brands, our insurance partner, Cover Genius, the folks from the Good Coffee Society, as well as our prize sponsors, Travel Talk, Explore, and Seconia Exclusive Journeys.
So the focus of Adventure Together is to bring the multi-day tourism industry together and provide a forum to share information, to increase the collective awareness, and then sprinkle a little bit of TourRadar's own expertise and data in for good measure.
With that goal in mind, we have a fantastic session now as we welcome Sher Khan from Google, who will share some travel trends, as well as our own Leah Costa from our data analytics team, who's going to dig into our own sales data to give you a bit of a view as to what the emerging trends that we're seeing, so that she can start to answer the question, now what?
So Sher leads Google's sales team for Austria, along with 18 years of leadership experience, and spent 5 years working on Google's flights, hotels, tours, and activities products. As for Leah, being our lead data analyst, there isn't a trend emerging or in the past that escapes her view, so you're in for a treat. So welcome Sher and Leah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the second day of the Adventure Together event. In this session, Sher and I are going to present some travel trends and insights on the adventure world from the past months, as well as take a sneak peek into the future. We'll look into travel intent, travelers' choices and mindsets, and see how that has evolved over the past years. So let's see how the next 30 minutes will look like. First, you'll hear from Sher, who brought some global travel trends from Google, looking into what were the predictions for 2022 and what is the new normal in travel. In the second part of the session, I am going to be sharing with you what our data at TourRadar tells us, focusing on these 3 questions: who is adventuring, when are travelers adventuring, and what adventures are they choosing? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello and welcome. Thank you very much to the TourRadar team. I don't think I've ever been on a stage that's reached quite this many parts of the world at the same time. I heard Travis say yesterday, so I'll say the same thing. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm very much excited to be back on a travel stage. As mentioned earlier, I used to work in the travel industry for Google for many, many years. Last time I was on a travel stage, I had to think back, was 2019 at the WTM in London. And the content of my presentation focused around 2020 being the biggest travel year yet. So when I was asked to join this great conference and talk about what the future holds for travel, I'm going to be a lot less risky this time, and I'm not going to make any bold predictions. What I will do, however, I'll talk in a lot of detail about the big travel trends that we've seen in 2022. The idea is that some of the learnings that we generated this year will be able to help make decisions for the future, and hopefully some new insights that you might have not seen as well. So let's take ourselves back to the beginning of 2022, January, February, the time where, depending on where you were in the world, where COVID was kind of dying down, restrictions were easing, but before the war in the Ukraine started, there was a couple of weeks with a lot of optimism. Regardless of which paper you picked up, travel was going to be back. 2022 was going to be the year, the biggest travel year yet. Let's have a look at what the European Travel Commission said. They forecasted 77% of Europeans planning trips this year. This is a pretty big number, up 21% year over year. And in the US, we have a very similar number. 81% is the number for the US. We'll be planning trips in 2022. On top of that, 25% said that they would be planning 3 or more trips this year. And what were travelers planning on doing? This results of this survey, this survey was taken in December 2021, so a long time ago now. A lot of people were probably sitting in some sort of lockdown situation, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to experience unfamiliar things. They wanted to try new things, 21% once in a lifetime, new experiences. 26% said different cultures, and 31% just something new. That was what the prediction said. This was what the plan was. A lot has changed since then. It's been a year of ups and downs. It's definitely been an extremely successful year for many, many companies in travel, and I think that's the bottom line of everything that I'm going to say today. We heard it yesterday. Travel definitely is back, depending on who you speak with. Many companies had a really good year. Some companies had the best year ever. Many companies hit their 2019 levels. But let's have a look at how this happened, because with all of the doom and gloom that we read in the paper about what's going on in the world today, how is it possible for travel still to have such a great year? And hopefully we'll continue to be able to have good years in the future as well. The two key insights that I want to leave with you here today. Number one, shifting priorities, and number two, flexible planning. Shifting priorities refers to the easing of COVID restrictions, the higher confidence in consumers and travelers to go to places and experience things despite COVID not being gone, and also the rising prices and inflation that we've seen in the last couple of months. And the focus for travelers has moved far away from health and safety, much more over to the cost of actually traveling. The second big factor here, flexible planning. I think we can all agree there's been a lot of uncertainty in the last 2.5 years, and this year hasn't exactly reduced in any sense. Therefore, travelers are looking for even more flexibility when it comes to traveling. It's very difficult to lock yourself in for something if you don't know what the next couple of months are going to bring. Short excursus here to a personal travel experience. I think So I was one of the people who was probably last to crawl out of their hole and start traveling again. I used to be on 50, 60, 70 flights a year for work mainly, and also pleasure before COVID hit. I spent 24 months not getting on a single plane. It's actually pretty nice, but I did miss, and I still do miss a lot of the experiences that didn't happen in the meantime. This year I've been on 4 return flights. I can attest to both of these trends that we're seeing. Firstly, costs of travel does seem to have gone up in the last couple of months. But secondly, the flexibility that some of the airlines and hotels are specifically been putting out there in the last year have been really, really good. 2 of my trips had to get changed. We had to reschedule to COVID. It was not a problem. The minimal fee that we had to pay to rearrange our trip was actually very, very affordable compared to what I remembered how it used to be like. So let's dive into these 2 trends in a little more detail. COVID-19 concerns are still relevant, but the confidence to go out there and travel is much higher than it was only a year ago. France, for example, 24% down in terms of COVID concerns. All the other countries depicted here across Europe are also showing significant decreases. If we look at what people are thinking about, this is data from Google Trends. Google Trends is a free platform that anybody can use where you can see search queries indexed across time. So you can enter whichever search query you'd like, and it'll tell you just exactly indexed how many people are searching for it, and you can reference whether it's gone up or down over time. This is data for the UK. It's very similar across many countries in Europe and also outside of Europe in the US, North America. Why is inflation so high? Up 1,200%. How to save money on gas and electric. I don't know who hasn't Googled this in the last couple of months. Up 500%. Will there be another recession? Up 1,100%. And will fuel prices go down? Up 3,700%. Hopefully they will. None of these trends are really, really good for travel. But what we do know is that increasing prices and the willingness to travel has to have some sort of impact on purchasing power parity. And one of those impacts is that it needs to go down a little bit. People are paying more for travel, for flights. In this instance, we can see in March the numbers were up 20% year over year. I've seen similar numbers recently. People are still traveling, therefore less bookings will take place. This data is from Adobe, incidentally. Travelers are just tired of putting their travel plans on hold, and they have appetite to spend, but a little less. This is also from the European Travel Commission. Very interesting data. It categorizes travelers into their travel budget buckets. Let's have a look at them for a second. On the left-hand side, you'll see the low-budget traveler, less than 500 euros. This is spend for accommodation, flights, and tours and activities together. This has grown 8.3%. 500 to 1,000 category is the biggest category, and it's growing plus 15%. 1,000 to 1,500 euros. Third category growing massively at 23%. And the two premium categories, the second highest one is pretty much flat, and the big one that took the hit is 2,000 euros plus at minus a third. This is telling us one thing, and that's travelers are looking for discounts, better deals, and they're looking for value above all. They need value because of the current conditions that they find themselves in. On the left-hand side, I'll walk you through this. I'm aware it's a little busy. On the left-hand side, the question was asked, rising prices and inflation, which of the what is the biggest concern that faces you at the moment? Is it rising prices and inflation? Is it COVID? Is it the Ukraine? And you can see, depending on the country that answered, there's a different skewing. Overall, the closer you are to the Ukraine, the higher the concern is. I think that makes sense. For the UK, for France, and for Spain, for example, the biggest issue is rising prices and inflation. And in the bottom bar here, you'll see the global average. Biggest issue globally that consumers are saying is the rising prices and inflation. COVID at 25%, and the Ukraine is actually at 23%. On the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see the biggest or most important thing that travel companies can offer to consumers at this point is discounts and deals. Again, they need value. They're trying to get a little more out of it. This is up in all countries that this was surveyed in, all the top countries in Europe. It was always the biggest category in most of these countries except for Germany. It's up in all of them now. And this is above things like money-back guarantee, no cancellation, and flexible dates. The second big factor that I'd like to play in here is vacation planning. It has become much more short-term, and I can also attest to that. Out of the 4 trips that I've booked this year, all of them have been less than 30 days. And that, if you're single, that's okay. If you have a family and young and elderly people that you're taking along, that's not a long time to plan those types of trips. We've done it every single time because we've never known whether we were going to be able to go due to all the uncertainty around. This shows the booking window for summer holidays by countries. There's 7 countries depicted, and you'll see that over half of them are showing that the booking window is less than 3 months. That means most people are booking less than 90 days before they actually want to travel. And if we take some external data, we've got 45 days, which is 7% down year over 3 year, the average booking window. Finally, European travelers are showing a lot of flexibility when it comes to adapting their travel plans. This stat actually really amazed me. Question was, what would travelers do if their preferred accommodation was sold out where they were going? The 4 answers that they could respond with: travel to the same destination at a different time, travel to a different destination, book a more expensive accommodation, or don't travel at all. If we take out Spain for a second, where half of the people said they wouldn't travel at all, the most common response is travel to a different destination. So people are saying, I want to travel here and I want to stay there, and if I can't stay there, I'm actually going to go and travel over there. That's really, really revealing. Another one that was also very interesting is booking a more expensive accommodation, upgrading and paying more for something if you can't get what you want is still also an option. That's it from me. Let me summarize really quickly the 2 big trends that we're seeing. Number 1, rising prices and inflation is the number 1 concern that most travelers have today, and the best thing that travel companies can do to support that is to provide value. The second part is flexibility. I personally have seen a big increase in how companies deal with flexibility. This is something that travelers need due to the uncertainty that surrounds them. And now I'm going to pass it over to Leah. She's going to walk through whether some of these aggregate trends are also replicated in what data TourRadar has.
Thank you, Cher. So, looks like everyone was planning to travel during summer, and that travel intent is back. Let's see if our data at TourRadar tells us the same story. So, as I mentioned previously, using the data we collect from our internal tools, I will focus on 2022, from January to September. And I will compare the trends found during this period with the corresponding months of 2021. This comparison will go back to 2019, pre-pandemic, to assess the evolution of sales and how trip choices changed over time. We'll also look into the Google search volume based on the 5 million multi-day tours and adventure-specific search terms that we are currently tracking. Examples of such terms include Europe tours, Italy tours, Japan tours, and many, many others. So based on this Google search volume data, the graph represented here illustrates quite well how the search volume and the travel demand has increased over the past year, and how it's actually recovering the figures from 2019. Compared with last year, we already see a growth of 44%. Now, looking into the traffic volume on our website and comparing with last year, we see a significant increase in the number of visits, which almost doubled this year. The biggest growth happened during Q3 in our summer months. We see an even bigger growth in the number of travelers that booked adventures with TourRadar, and versus 2021, we see that the number of bookings more than tripled. Again, the strongest growth happened during Q3 from July to September. Now, just based on this data, also at TourRadar, we can see that travel intent is back. But let's now further explore our data and look into the who. Who is adventuring? Looking into the different source markets, we can see that 55% of TourRadar travelers this year came from North America, which is a larger share than what we used to have back in 2019. Now, if we focus on the APAC region, this was still quite dormant during 2021, but and this is expected, right? The travel restrictions were lifted much later, and the awakening phase post-COVID was consequently delayed. But this year, we already see it starting to pick up, and there's actually a lot of potential for the APAC countries to grow, to at least match the share we used to have back in 2019. Now, if we look again into the Google search volume, this pretty much aligns with what we saw in bookings that I just shared. So the monthly searches for the US are 7% above 2019, while for Australia, they are still 23% behind. Now, if we focus on the age split of our travelers, it looks like the 30th year lost share to our younger travelers, to below the age of 25. So it seems like this younger generation is more than ever eager to explore new locations at the age they feel the most adventurous, which resulted in doubling the share of bookings this year compared with 2019. Further exploring the bookings from our youngest travelers at TourRadar this year, so our Gen Z travelers, it looks like 65% of them prefer to travel solo, to meet new groups of people, and they are looking for smaller basket sizes. On average, per traveler, they spend 21% less than the older travelers. Now, looking into these older travelers above the age of 25, these are not so keen on traveling solo, and actually the majority is looking for adventures that they can share with their close friends or with their family. So now that we've explored the who, let's move forward and focus on the when. When are travelers adventuring? Focusing on the booking dates, back in 2021, we saw a spike in the number of bookings being purchased more than half a year in advance. These were mainly North American travelers that back then were planning ahead their spring-summer adventures for this year, 2022. In 2022, there was clearly a shift towards smaller booking windows, and this aligns perfectly with what Cher presented. We see 42% of our bookings being purchased less than 2 months in advance, and the majority of them were planning also their spring-summer adventures for this year. So now focusing on the departure dates, and as the previous slides already suggested, in 2022 so far, the majority of the departures happened during Q3, with the strongest month for TourRadar being September. Now the last question I want to get us to is, what adventures are travelers choosing? Do they prefer to travel long distances or to staying closer to home? Do they prefer shorter or longer stays? What destinations are they booking? We'll for sure get an answer to all these questions very briefly. So let's start with domestic versus international demand. So last year, as you might know, with still a lot of uncertainties, travelers wanted to go back to their adventures, but they were focusing more on domestic. And I would like to highlight particularly Australia, where over 50% of the bookings were to travel domestically. This year, the mindset has definitely changed, and we see international travel coming back, with the share of domestic staying below 10% in the different source markets. But what I would still like to highlight is that this year, the share of domestic trips, it's 1 to 3 percentage points above what it used to be back in 2019. So maybe travelers, some of them are still reluctant to travel internationally, or perhaps with COVID, travelers discovered the beauty of getting to know their own country as well. So the length of our travelers' stays has also changed over time, and we see that 5 to 7 days adventures became increasingly more popular over the past 2 years, and the share of bookings with this trip length has actually increased 5 percentage points when we compare to 2019. Now, the choice of shorter stays might be related with the shorter booking windows, because travelers are booking last minute. They might not have as a bigger availability to book for longer stays. Additionally to this, our data tells us that currently there's a higher preference for single-country adventures, which might not require as many days to visit as a multi-country adventure would. And lastly, also from what Cher presented, travelers are now more price-sensitive, so they might be choosing shorter stays to help them stay within their budgets. Almost coming to an end with this session, I want to share with you some of the top destinations of 2022. I will focus on the summer, but also on these last months of 2022. So let's start with summer. From July to September, we see all European countries in the top 10 list, with Italy, France, and England occupying the podium. Croatia this summer was not as popular as in 2019, but it still is part of the top 20 list. Now, looking ahead into the future and focusing on these last months of the year, we see a higher demand for North African countries, Egypt and Morocco, and particularly Egypt was quite a strong destination even through COVID restrictions, with actually surpassing the number of bookings from 2019 during this summer. Additionally, Asian destinations are starting to pick up popularity, in particular Vietnam and Thailand. And despite not being on the top 10 list, with the opening of Japan, we see an increase in the number of bookings to this destination, with August and September being really close to 2019. And lastly, travelers are looking to the classical winter escapes to Europe to visit the Christmas markets, most likely. So now what? I want to end this session with some key takeaways of what Cher and I just presented. Travel is back and people are eager to embark on new adventures, but they are shifting their focus from health and safety to cost of traveling, also preferring shorter stays to help them stay within their budget. They are now more flexible when it comes to planning their next adventure, having shorter booking windows, but they will be looking more into the value they get for their money, and not necessarily searching for specific destinations, but probably more focusing on the best deals. So this brings new challenges to the travel industry, and knowing our customers well is key to offer them exactly what they're hoping for. Delivering personalized travel services is, without a doubt, of utmost importance. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Cher, for being here today.
Thank you very much.